Okay. Um, Hello, good afternoon, or night, or day, or wherever you are. It's your boy Trench, and some of y'all saw on my Instagram story, I did a small poll on whether you all would like for me to make, a vid on how I make my melodic stuff and just music in general. And well, obviously, most people just voted yes, so here you go. Um, Sorry if my accent gets weird. Same for my pronunciation. I'm not a native speaker. Also, my voice is like that doesn't matter. So, I decided I wanted to load up this project. It's just like a normal chord progression, and I'm gonna be sharing like some tips on this, and then I'm gonna turn this into a full song. So I'll probably be recording for like an hour or so. So let's get down with the basics. I started with basically this melody. Basic melodic stuff, right? So, my sound design in general is just like, the typical generic feature based chords. This is something I do to make everything more centered. So I'm gonna go a bit in like chord stack theory, like a cloudy sky and all that. So you'll get a general idea of how I do stuff. So the idea to make a strong chord progression, and the progression doesn't matter. Like a strong chord stack is to have strength and power in the center, and then make everything surround you, right? So you do this by a putting like really detuned chords. I generally just use saw waves and put one, put them on 16 detune. Sorry, 16 unison and just normal detune. Sometimes I just detune the high part more, and I raise it by an octave and add some OTT because we're fucking dumb. And then I use a square wave. You can just mess around, try to make your chords as full as possible, and then this is when the important stuff comes. So, with a less detuned or just not detuned at all saw, you have a strong center, right? I also put, yeah, no, I didn't put out detune this one, but normally I do. And this one is like a mix between the very detuned and the less detuned, right? But then here's the important part. For non-generic chords and very, like surrounding chords, like really nice, you use stuff that you wouldn't normally use in sound design, right? So this time I'm using synthpads. It's a free library by Labs. You can get it for free. Really nice. So I use pads here. So yeah, that's like an important basic. And another thing I wanna make sure you'll know, I clip, and it's not so terrible. You can clip sometimes, and it won't be so bad. And sometimes, oh sorry, sometimes clipping can actually bring more to your song, like more power, more strength, and all that. So in this case, but once I get the bass settled and all that, I'll start seeing some heavy clipping, and you'll see that the song, if properly mixed, it will sound good enough. I also designed this kick just for this, specific time. This really strong, right? And for my kicks, I deleted the thing, but normally I distort the kick, maybe layer it with something to give it more power. In this case, I think I made it off a sound thing. This. I think I made it from this one, and I layered it with a sub and some high end, and then I distorted everything, and I made it a bit stereo and added reverb, and then some OTT, and here I did the same thing, except I made it more mono, so that way I just make some kicks. And then for my snares, um, I always vary between different types of snares, like more generic stuff or sometimes organic stuff. In this case, I use a more organic snare. I just heavily distorted it and EQ'd just to clean it up. That EQ's a nightmare. You shouldn't do stuff like this, but this snare was really lacking punch. So, yeah, that's like my basics right there. And I just want to improve the chords a bit more. So we're just gonna make another layer. And this is something I do very often. This is some trenchcore sauce right there. So you go over here, instruments, orchestral, and I don't even know how to pronounce this, but it's a fucking voice. And what I normally do is turn on the reverb, and as you can hear, this sounds like this. I normally pitch it at 1 octave. EQ. And this is the fun part, distortion. See how it like beefs the sound up, but it becomes very like ear rapey, so I just and then OCT. And you gotta make it wider, else it will stand out too much and not mix with the chords. And I generally cut the high end, so it doesn't like clash with other stuff and becomes too ear rapey. So yeah, there you go. You get some like basic trench chords right there. And another tip that's very important, I learned this. Shout out to Vix for this. Um, I layer. I normally do it with Silent, but my thing broke, so I'm just do it with Serum. Um, you add a white noise layer, and that's to keep your high end clean. Because when you have like too much high end, when you detune your chords and all that, your high end gets really messy and phasey. So you don't want that. So I normally just add a white noise and cut. And if it's not stereo, the advantage of using it in silent one is that you can make it stereo instantly by just detuning it. But in this case, I'm gonna have to use also an imager, set it to serialize, and there we go. And sometimes it can be like too low. You see how it actually kind of phases using the also an imager? That's because really important stuff to learn. When you make something stereo, you're basically applying a chorus on it. Like every mid-side processing thing works like that. It just enhances the high end, the stereo image by adding a chorus. And I don't exactly know how you make it mono. I'm not an engineer, but you see, if you make something too wide, it can like drift into nothingness. And when you translate the mix into mono, it won't sound good at all. So you gotta keep balance in there. Oh god, that's a bit eerie. Yeah, here I normally also low pass the high end. Get this like curb thing. And now let's see how it's. Okay, and then this is like a really important part. If you want everything to sound mixed together, let me go and just. Oh fuck! What the fuck? Okay, there we go. Label it stacks, and here I just OTT, tame the high end a bit, push the mids downwards and upwards, and then I compress it. You already got multiband compression, over the top compressor. That's what OTT stands for. And I just compress it, to make everything sound close. Sorry, not close, glued together. You see how I'm just like retarded? I can't speak English that well. Anyways, yeah. What you want to do, you don't want to enhance the attack on this because, Your chords, they don't need to have an attack. They mostly stand like in the background for your lead. I'm gonna get to that next. But you don't want to enhance the attack. You want to make sure that the attack doesn't isn't too much, and just enhance the release so that it sounds more like like a sound that surrounds you and it's going to act as a bed for your lead. So yeah, you got that. And then I normally just saturate it, because saturation is also a really good way to glue something, right? Because you're you're turning every sound, you're adding harmonics to every sound, and they're going to share harmonics, and so that's going to make it sound more glued together. Okay, we're going to use Valhalla Room here. Yeah, it it does that thing a lot. I kind of hate it. There we go. Unless you're trying to like really enhance the reverb and make it show, always put your reverb after your compression, and especially after your distortion, or else it will sound like blown out and just make the sound really weird, not strong. Like when you without the high end, it's like a lot weirder and calmer and darker. It doesn't sound as strong, right? With the high end, it like adds a lot more power. In this case, I'm actually delete the core because the release is giving me a bit of trouble, and I kind of don't like in this like special scenario. Okay, so that's the chords, right? You got some basic chords, and they already sound kind of like the chords I would do. But there's a lot of stuff to go over before we get an actually good, like, full chord. We're also gonna use reverb to fill those empty spaces. Yeah, this is gonna be a very slow video because I don't want to edit this. I don't want to become a full-time YouTuber. So you are gonna see like every single step, and maybe showing that could actually help. Okay, so the next thing I do after I settle down the chords is I copy the chord progression, or you can do it like manually if you want. And then I just do this. Oh wait. What the fuck? Okay, I'm fucking dead right now. There we go. So there you go. We have a nice bass lane. And what I usually do for my basses is, I use a saw wave. Normally this one, I don't know why, but it gives a different feeling to the sound. Oh god, okay, that's terrible. Make sure to stay in mono and legato when using bass. The high end, because you get enough high end with the super sauce, right? You don't want the bass giving too much high end, and you have to make sure that your mid range isn't clashing so much with the bass. If you get a muddy bass, it will clash with the chords and everything will sound like shit. So yeah, make sure to keep that. You see, this is too random, so sometimes I like to turn the detune down. And sometimes I use different bass things. For example, this thing right here, wait, I can ask kick, is a really nice. Oh god, okay, that's terrible. Make sure to stay in mono and legato when using bass. got a really nice bass now, really gritty. I just boosted with Camel Crusher. Also, let's see how the chords are handling. So they maybe have a bit too much attack. So I use a transient processor. The FL native one is really good, but you can use any transient processor and it will sound good. And I lowered the attack down and I increased the release. They come in like much smoother instead of. There's a slight click you may be able to hear, but I prefer to like just delete it completely, or else it will just not be as good. And I usually put that after my OTT. OTT can give a lot of transient to a sound. Now, another important thing in a bass, I use also 9 imager for this. You go and over here between 130 and 140 hertz is nice, and you grab this and you make it completely mono. And what this will do is just make the sub frequencies more mono. Now I know sub doesn't extend to 140 hertz, but that part can either way, like anything below 250, if it's too stereo, it can make your sound like more muddy. So it's recommendable that you just make it more mono, unless you're making trap. If you make trap or trap metal with stereo subs and all that, it's okay, because mixing trap ain't that hard unless you're making like really complex trap. But if you're making trap beats like Buster the God or those people, there's nothing to worry about them. But for EDM, it's more recommendable that you keep your sub more mono, and the same for your bass. I usually just do this. This is like the rest of the frequency spectrum. I'm just making it more mono. Okay, yeah, I'm just checking if the volume is too low. Okay, there we go. And then if you want more bass, this is something I really recommend. If you have also 9, you will also get tonal balance control 2, which is a really nice plugin to check your balance. That's how I balance my songs. So let's see if we have enough bass. As you can see, everything is perfectly balanced. So there's no need to add a second layer. Before you start adding layers, just make sure that you're not overkilling. Because if you overkill, let me say real quick, if you overkill, your project is just gonna become more messy. And if you don't have that much of a good computer like me, it will become very annoying because you'll start over processing and over layering, and that can make stuff really messy in your project. So I don't think I want this snare, because let's just settle a normal drum beat, right? Without sidechain and all the. See, I'm already lagging. That's probably because I'm recording on OBS. If you get lag, I really, really, really recommend that before you tweak any other weird settings, you first go to the project and see your time base. Just turn it down and look how my performance will improve. You see much better. And if you're having too much trouble, especially with super sauce, like when you layer super sauce, everything can get really annoying and performance heavy. So if you're having trouble with that, just go to your super saw. Like the one that has most voices is generally the one that's going to cause you more trouble. So this one has 16 and 16. That's 32 voices plus every single note that's playing. That's like many, many, many voices in just one chord. So what you go and do is you check in what mixer track it is. It's in 4. You turn off the effects of this, and if it's linked to another channel, also make sure to turn the effects from there. And then you just render and replace. We're just gonna do that to make sure that we can flawlessly work on this project. There we go, and you see it's turning to audio format, and you link it to its old, to this past, to his respective mixer channel, and voila. See how I'm only getting to 40. I was getting to 90 before I did all the changes, so I really recommend you do this stuff. Anyways, the kick is nice, but it has a little bit too much transient, and it's a little bit too clicky. So how do you fix that? You just use an EQ to turn down the high end, because sometimes kicks have their transient in. Normally, like EDM kicks have their transients in the high end. So if you turn down the high end, the transient will become less. So it's a this versus a this. See how it sounds more round. And if you're having too much trouble, like alternatively, if you're having too much trouble with the transient, you can just use a transient processor or a compressor. Both work. And turn down the transients. Maybe turn up the resistance. This will make it tighter. This will make it looser. So yeah, and so that's what I recommend for kicks if you're having trouble with that. And you can sidechain. I use the feature limiter, but you can use any other way to sidechain. Fuck, my voice is dying. I used to use a fruity balance, because you can just wait. You can just do this, right? But I prefer to use a limiter, and I don't know why, but it gives a different feeling, and it's, I don't know, it does. I can't really explain it, but I work better with fruity limiter, and I just normally turn on the threshold like this, turn out the knee and the ratio, turn down the release and the sustain all the way down, and okay, so yeah, I just link the kick to it, and you gotta make sure that when you sidechain to very mid-heavy elements, there's no need to make a really strong sidechain. You don't want something like this, right? That's too much, because the kick isn't going to conflict that much with elements that sit in the mid-range and the high end, right? That's because the kick is more of a low end heavy sound. So you want to keep the sidechain low and the release low, so that way the sound will still duck and it will give more presence to your kick, but without sacrificing too much of the clarity of the mix. And then for bass elements, you want a stronger sidechain. Also, I don't recommend doing this. I recommend routing every element except for low end elements to a sidechain channel, right? So that way you can sidechain easy without having to add a limiter on every channel. So yeah, I'm gonna just do that. Now what's really conflicting with the kick right now is the bass. So we just sidechain the bass. For some of my projects, I use 2 or 3 bass layers, because sometimes my bass isn't enough. But in this occasion, we mix the chords nicely, we mix the bass nicely, so nothing is clashing and everything is really full. So there's really no need to add a second bass or a third bass layer. But if there is a need to do so, then I recommend you do, because it will give you more control on your bass and your low end, and everything will sound fuller, right? So yeah, here we're going to make a stronger sidechain. Now, there's a problem with sidechain that many people get, and that is having really, really, what's the word? Inconsistent, like really dynamic sidechain, where the kick doesn't, the sound doesn't duck as like the same every time. And you fix that, and that's because there's always a small delay from inside your DAW when you trigger a compressor. So I saw this in an oversampled video. You should check out that, guys. It's really nice. That the delay is between 5 and 7 milliseconds. So I always use 7 to make sure. So you do this to your sidechain channel and to your bass channel if you're sidechaining the bass like that. And yeah, that will make it cleaner and punchier sidechain. As you can see there, I just deleted the thing, the voice, the distorted sound I was using, because since I'm not gonna apply it this time, or maybe not right now, there's no need to have that there. And as you can see, it was also very processed. Sometimes you don't need to process a sound that much, because over processing can make sounds really messy and stuff. Like every time you add an EQ and adjust stuff, the phase of that sound gets adjusted, right? And if your sounds are very phasey and very uneven, then you can have a lot of issues while mixing. Anyways, I also recommend sidechaining your snare, but not using for delimiter. Like in this case, the tail is too long, so let me show you an example. If I use the snare to sidechain using a fruit delimiter, this is what happens. Okay, for some, oh, there we go. You see how the release is like too long? That's because of the tail of the snare. It's applying pressure to the limiter. So what I recommend in this case, if the snare is too long, you just use fruity balance. Or alternatively, if the snare isn't conflicting as much, then there's no need to sidechain it at all. But I normally would recommend using a snare sidechain. It's very good, and it will make your snare stand out really well. This is a really small tip. The default value of everything in FL Studio, like every parameter, it's 80%. So when you duck the volume, make sure it goes back to 80% every time. So let's see how this sounds now with a sidechain. And let's add another kick over here. It's like really clean, everything's nice. So you got a basic drum beat and a basic drop already. Oh, look at that. That sounds really nice. This snare, they could get a little bit more reverb, and after the compressor, because that's gonna beef the reverb up. have the very basic part of this song already settled, right? So this is when we have to do the lead, right? To add a top melody, because just making chords isn't interesting. Now, I want to quickly just mention this. Most of my inspiration when it comes to chords are all around this one person. You may know him if you come from the underground, and this is A Cloudy Sky. This is like my favorite artist right now, and y'all should definitely check him out. Now, on his newest songs, you won't really notice, but for example, on this song right here in the second drop. As you can notice, like my chords sound very similar to his, especially on this song right here. So that's where my inspiration comes from, right? And at first, those chords, they sound dreamy, they sound like out of this world, and they don't sound like a chord you could make with a supersaw, but in a way, you actually know it's like a normal supersaw. It's just so processed and has so many layers, it doesn't sound like a normal supersaw, right? So this is where the lead comes in, and it's very important to have a good lead, because leads they color a sound, and so as you can see, everything's like, okay, it's nice, it sounds pretty and all that, but it doesn't sound colorful, it doesn't sound like interesting. It's just a regular very big and wide chord drop, right? So what we're gonna do real quick is design a lead. I usually go many ways when making a lead and a melody in general, but a technique that I've been using lately that I can like really recommend is grabbing a sound that wouldn't normally be a lead and turning it into a lead via either processing or just not turning it into like a electronic sounding lead at all, and instead use it as a top melody, right? So I'm gonna give another example here so you can have a clearer idea on what I'm talking about. Bendel. This is another dude that's he's like really talented. You should definitely check him out. So in this song, if you can hear the lead there, it isn't a saw lead, it isn't a square lead, it isn't like a digital lead, it's a violin. Like, who thinks of that? It's really original, it adds a lot of color and depth to the track. It's just overall amazing. It's a really nice idea, and I use that as a inspiration for my track Cry Till Your Eyes Bleed, as you can hear here. That like na 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 na, that's a violin I use as a lead. So in this case, I think what could fit is a violin lead that we're going to turn into a more digital lead. And this is going to take a while because my rig isn't so strong, right? But I'm going to load up a library in Contact. It's going to take me a while, though. Okay, there we go. The viola is a really nice thing if you want to utilize this. Violas are really nice for this specific method because you got violins, violas, cellos, and contrabass. more so on basses or just contrabass. That's how the string range works in orchestral music. Violins can sometimes go more in the mid range, but generally they're really high in the note spectrum. Therefore, they cover more of the high end and the top end of your spectrum. But if you want to lead the colors chords, which chords normally sit in the mid range, you should use a sound that typically goes in the mid range, right? So violas in a concert, they go in the mid range, and they don't go that far down. They don't go that far up. While a violin does, violins kind of shriek in the high end. So yeah, for this specific method, using a viola is really nice. But as you can hear in Bendel's song, he used a violin, and it worked really well. So you can there's like I told you in the beginning that you can clip, right? You can break the rules if you want, and that's perfect. Breaking the rules is what makes music go forward, right? So don't be afraid to just don't follow to not follow exactly what I'm saying, and just mess around with whatever you want, because that's kind of how I learned to make music. Make it in a not conventional way, and that's what most of the underground is about. So yes, you can use a viola if you want, but even if you make it work, you can use a cello. So enough pep talk. I'm gonna show you how I turn a viola into a lead. So let's go into pattern mode real quick, and I'm gonna show you. So right now it's just a viola. Doesn't sound so special, right? This is when the special stuff comes in, right? So this is a method that overdrive guitar pedals use, and it's low passing a sound and then distorting it, rather than distorting it and putting a low pass after. You can also do this with a band pass and a high pass. Both work. Um, so what this does essentially is it deletes the high end or the low end, doesn't matter, depends on what type of filter you're using, and then distorts it. And the distortion algorithm will do its best to recreate the high end, right? Just like an MP3 encoder would try to do its best to delete unnecessary frequencies and stuff like that and replace them with the algorithm. So the distortion algorithm will try to add high end where there is no high end, and it will turn out in a different way. So let's see what happens here. So this is before. That's after. And as you can see, it's loud as shit. So let's just turn it down. You've probably heard this type of sound before. Jaren does this trick a lot, but I don't exactly know how to replicate it. It turns into a very shrieky sound, and it like adds a lot more color to it, and it sounds more like a lead, right? So then we're going to add OTT. OTT is really important for this tutorial, by the way. So if you're really interested in a really nice plugin, it's free. You can grab in the Extra Records website. So yeah. As you can see, it's already sounding more like a lead, but it needs more power, right? So we're going to add a second camel crusher, and this preset right here, I use it a lot. It just beefs the sound up and turns the volume up. Now we have a little bit of trouble with the release on this, just like I had in the choir thing. So interesting. Well, I'm just gonna keep it that way. So next up, so the sound doesn't sound so dry, we will add some reverb. And for lead sounds, it's recommended that you add a lot of pre-delay so that the actual sound won't come in. Or alternatively, you can route it to another mixer bus and add reverb there and sidechain the reverb so the sound doesn't get drowned out in reverb. So that works too. But just usually add some pre-delay and mess with the reverbs built-in like dampering parameters. So yeah, this kind of hurts, right? It's like too shrieky, so we're just gonna EQ. It's basically a copy of this EQ, but I'm just deleting more of the frequencies here. Okay, so we're going to make a little bit of alterations to this. So we're going to go here and we're going to just add more movement to this, right? So something that works really well is the spiccato, I think it is. Sometimes, presets won't work well. In this case, I think I want to use a violin, but sometimes it will work, and sometimes different violins will work. So that's when that's what I'm gonna test out right now. So, in case that you don't, have infinite content libraries, which you shouldn't have actually, you can use, your standard stuff. So here we have string solo. We can cut over here. We're gonna go 11. I'm gonna check this out. case, I think making the bass more stereo is actually gonna work. So we're just gonna make it a little bit wider. You know, there's some thumb rules that you're gonna have to apply in every mix, but um, in every mix there can be like different stuff that works better. So in some mixes, maybe having the sub not as stereo will work well, while in other mixes, it may sound like shit, right? In this case, it doesn't sound as bad because I just toggled it off and on, so I just made it less stereo. Okay, so what I normally do is add a little bit of variation every like 8 bars to a lead melody, so it doesn't get like too boring. So that's the sidechain making everything sound so low. I'm just like shamelessly clipping. I don't really care about it. And you may not notice, but some artists that you like, not the mainstream stuff, because for industry standard, you just can't clip. Because most big artists have like engineers, so engineers that mix their stuff and they don't let it clip because they're old school. Not criticizing anyone who doesn't like to clip, by the way. I clip in some songs, fuck, and in other songs I just keep it traditional and all that, more professional if you want, per se. So, for example, here we want like really loud chords, so we can clip the chords if we want. You see, it's already like much more powerful, much more intense, much more emotional. So this is another trick I like to apply on my leads to make it sound like more human. Because you see, when a human plays an instrument, the instrument isn't perfectly tuned, and it doesn't sound so perfect. So what do? We add a pitch bend so that it doesn't play at the same pitch throughout the whole thing, but it kind of repeats so it's consistent. Yeah, I use isotope vinyl for this, and it's a really good plugin, and it's free, so you can go get it in the isotope website. Yeah. So you see, we already have like a really stable song, but it's kind of boring. still, like even after adding the melody, even after the drum pattern, even after everything, it gets a little bit boring. So we add ear candy. For ear candy, you see there I left these gaps in purpose, because you can fill these gaps with like drum fills, bass fills, perk fills, sweeps, and all that, right? All that good stuff. So here we can make it more interesting, right? By adding breaks and stuff like that. So let's see. I'm gonna listen back and see if I get inspiration there. Just cut. Right. Oh, okay. So this is what time base does. It just changes the resolution of the whole time scheme. So you see, it's as if I had this selected in the playlist. So it gets a little bit annoying sometimes. So we're gonna turn it off to 96. That way everything's like in grid. Okay, there we go. Second lead, and that's perfectly fine. Many people do that. So to add more depth to the track, to add more feel, we're going to add a second lead, and sometimes I'd like to make this lead play the top note of the chord progression that we have going on in the sauce. So I'm going to show you how I do it. And for the main lead, I do organic stuff, but sometimes for the top lead, we can do we can just use serum. That I had the lead routed to that thing. So yeah, we're just gonna lead that. You see how it gets really fucking loud. That's good, especially Camel Crusher. Camel Crusher has a compressor, and the compressor doesn't act like a normal compressor with ratio, threshold, blah blah blah, because the main plugin is actually a distortion plugin, right? So it just compresses the shit out of the sound and makes it like really loud, because you got upwards and downwards compression. Downwards compresses the dynamics, upwards brings up the quiet parts. So this one just has like, it just squashes the sound and then adds harmonics. So it's a really good distortion plugin because of that. Plus it's free, so you can also go grab that. see, I don't exactly know how to explain this, but if you distort a sound and then put two notes together, it does this like really vowely and weird sound that I really like. That happens with overdrive distortion. Also, distortion just likes to add dynamics, right? So, um, if you use a sine wave that's just a pure tone, and you add distortion, it will add a lot of dynamics to it, which is why it's so crunchy without even having to low pass it that much. Yeah, so that's a really cool tip. Okay, so we have a really straightforward sound. Sorry, drop. Um, so I said I was gonna fill the empty gaps. Fuck, you see my pronunciation is so weird. I'm gonna fill the empty gaps with different sounds. So I'm gonna see how it works out. That, for example, could get a bass. Now, to be honest, to be like completely honest, I suck at bass design. But a bass that I really like to mess around with is I get the error all the time. There's nothing to be afraid of. Okay. Um, this bass that sounds like a blown out speaker. I just use the AC Hum 1 noise preset and the basic shape, the sine, and then we just pull it down to make a. You see, that sounds just like a sub with white noise, and then we distort it to add harmonics, and this is what happens. No, your headphones didn't break. It wasn't your speaker breaking. That's an actual bass. And it's a technique you can hear in dubstep and in some underground genres. It's really nice. And then I don't put OTT on this because OTT is kind of weird. So we can make a modulation for this, right? If we, for example, pick this that has more harmonics. This isn't a pure sine wave, by the way. It has a wavetable, so you can add different harmonics to it. It's really fat. I love this bass. So we can modulate this if we want. See how great it sounds? This is perfect. Let's see what happens if we clip it. Oh god, that's terrible. Okay. You get like different variations depending on the distortion. That one isn't so nice, but I personally like tube a lot, so maybe we can actually modulate that. This probably has some sub to it, so it will make the sub wider. So okay, this is when you have to decide, because as you can see, these two are competing. There's some things to take in consideration. I know I'm being messy because I was gonna make a bass and now I'm talking about leads, but hear me out. we're gonna have to take a decision here, right? So which of these should stay on top and should like take the lead here, like the picture, because it's a lead, right? That's why it's a lead, because it leads the song. So we have two leads. One is a top lead, one is a main lead. So obviously the one that should stay here, like the one that should stay up front, is this one. So what are we gonna do? We're just gonna keep this one like this, and the other one, this is the top lead. We're gonna make it more mono, or actually more stereo. Let's see how that turns out. We're gonna use Pro Q3, which is my favorite EQ, but I use, parametric EQ too, because it's like simpler and faster. I'm just gonna, and you see that's the body of the sound. So since it's clashing with the other lead, we're gonna just push it down. And since we're trying to make it wider so it stays more in the background, we're gonna put more side to it. And then we're gonna do the opposite with mute. You see, there's like more room now, but it's obviously not perfectly mixed. Okay, so we're gonna use the bass note here. Okay, we're gonna do an F then. And we may actually need to push this back. Right? What the fuck am I doing? Well, as I told you in the beginning, experimenting, you find more stuff. So I will try it out. For this occasion maybe it doesn't work, but let's try another one, right? A monster, for example. It doesn't work at all, but we just gotta keep, finding. As you can see, it's also clashing with the sauce, so we're gonna just turn it down a bit. Pro tip: if you wanna like keep something more up front, I suggest you just keep it more in the middle. Yeah, so that's what I just did to the main lead, and it's sounding out a lot more now. You see, in worst case scenario, I'm just gonna use a pre-existing growl, and we should be done with it. But I'm trying to keep it all like myself, right? Like a motherfucker, but you see, it's much more powerful, right? And let's see what happens if we would have to go into the mastering stage for that, and that would suck. Okay, I see the problem here. We're gonna make it shorter. Okay, so also this vocodix. Vocodix works with basically it works with a thing. That sounded really stupid. It works with it works with MIDI, but that's what I'm trying to find, right? So let's see what happens if we use another thing for vocoder. Okay, and I think I suck at basses, and that's settled. That's like for sure settled. Okay. So we're instead in that little break, we're gonna use a perk fill or drum fill, and we can make those really fast. Nothing special. No, that's really bad. Yeah. So also bass fills. You can make your unique bass fills if you want. I did that in one song, like the last one I uploaded. So you can also make a cloud sky type bass fills, which sound like really distorted and blown out. But yeah. Also, I'm not gonna stretch this out for too long, right? I'm just gonna make a simple drop, and I think this will be like part one. Maybe we'll do like a small series. But obviously this is gonna be one longest video covering like some of my techniques, and that's it. So yeah, we're gonna use a bass now. really solid right now. We could make a small fill over here. Sorry, there we go. Yeah, we're just gonna make like a small fill. As you can see, I'm like already running out of ideas. And if you really want, I can like make an intro and bridge and all that, like turn this into a full song. I think I actually will, because I really like how the scores are sounding. But for now, we're just gonna keep it like this, and maybe another day I can go around intros and all that. Yeah. Oh god. Okay, here we can add another bass, but we could also do like sky fills, right? So we just roll a low drum, we pitch it down even more, and make it really right. That's already like really distorted the volume, right? And we can make it reverse and just can do that. Oh, I have another one that's really good. Wait. Yeah, I'm just gonna do this fills and we'll be done, because you know it's too much if I just. This. so we can just like reverse it. Here we can make like something else, like something really cool. We can maybe add some effects, like right before we go into the sidechain. So we can do this. I don't have a beat crusher right now, but this is like some sauce. The fucking delay 3 has a beat crusher, so you can use that. Holy fucking shit. Oh, that's because it's duplicating the signal. Look, we're gonna make a fucking trap melody. Wait, look. What the fuck? Okay. Okay, that's too much. Okay, yeah, that won't work. But yeah, I think that settles it. Like, I did some fails and stuff. I went over my chord stack stuff, and I think I'm just stretching this too much. So, anyways, hope you all find some useful stuff from this. Um, I really wanted to do this from a long time ago, and I really wish that when I first started making melodic music, I could find a video like this. And sorry if it's too long, right? I really don't want to go and edit this shit out. But yeah, hope you'll learn from it, and goodbye.